I nudged Maya. We need to talk. Now. Inside the farmhouse, we huddled over the photos Gabriel had forwarded. The man was confirmed. Former military contractor. Worked as external compliance for Apex's risk mitigation unit. In normal language? Corporate cleaner. He's not here to clap, Maya said grimly. No, I replied. He's here to send a message. That night, I slept with the lights on. The shotgun stayed close, and still, I dreamed of soil. Only it wasn't being planted. It was being dug. Shallow. Desperate. I woke up gasping. The land outside was silent. But my instincts weren't. I checked the barn. It had been breached, not vandalized, not robbed, inspected. Like someone was looking for something they thought my father left behind. And I knew what it was. The final copy of the original water routing patent, proof Apex's systems were built directly on our design, and not just inspired by it. I had hidden it inside the back panel of his tractor's engine box. Not digital, not traceable. Just paper. But the bolts had been moved. Someone had been within inches of erasing history. Again. I took the patent. I burned a second copy, then a third, and I stored each in a different safety deposit box in 3 different states. They weren't going to silence us again, not even in the dark. The next day, the news broke. Carter Vance had turned over evidence to reduce his sentence. Emails, wire transfers, and one chilling transcript. Her brother gave us the internal schematic. Said she wouldn't back down. Asked for a buyout plus immunity. David. He hadn't just betrayed me. He'd tried to sell me to them like a problem to be handled. And the worst part? He hadn't just done it to protect himself. He did it thinking, I'd forgive him eventually. That's what always scared him. Not the truth, but that I'd live long enough to tell it. I released the final recording, the one I had held back. A conversation between David and Carter, secretly recorded by an Apex assistant who later came forward under whistleblower protection. David. She won't let go. Carter. Then give us access to the land. We'll take care of it. David. Just don't hurt her. Carter. That depends on how loud she gets. I got loud. Every media outlet picked it up. By the time the sun set, the Reyes name was no longer buried under press silence and boardroom lies. It was a fire, a reckoning, a warning, and I stood in the center of it with nothing but boots on dirt and a father's voice echoing in every inch of who I'd become. They wanted it quiet. Apex. David. Even. The press. But the truth doesn't go quiet. Not when it's lived in the open. Not when it's rooted in land. I stood in the courtroom as Carter Vance was sentenced. 10 years. Federal prison. Not nearly enough, but it was a crack in the stone wall. A warning to every other boardroom that thought land and legacy were just another asset to strip and sell. Maya stood beside me. We didn't smile. We didn't celebrate. We just exhaled. Outside the courthouse, the sky opened with summer rain. No speeches. No cameras, just the sound of something being washed clean. I returned to the farmhouse the next morning. For the first time in months, it felt still. Safe. Lila was waiting for me, her smile soft, her arms full of seedlings. I figured we could start a new plot, she said. The Eastfield's been resting, ready to grow again. I nodded. We planted silence into the earth. Not to bury it, but to honor what had come from it. Weeks passed, and then the letter arrived. No stamp, no return address. Just my name, written in the same scratchy penmanship that once filled family birthday. Cards. David inside was a check, a note, and something else, folded and yellowed, a picture of the 2 of us at age 10, standing in the mud, holding shovels taller than we were. On the back, it said, I didn't know how to fix it, so I broke it. I was weak. You weren't. You saved what I tried to sell. I hope one day that matters more than what I took from you. The check was blank, uncashed, a peace offering I didn't ask for. I burned it. And I kept the photo, because the past doesn't disappear. It becomes part of the soil. That fall, Rooted Truth gained nonprofit status. Farmers called, mothers, daughters, veterans. All of them with stories of land threatened, families fractured, truths twisted. I listened to each one, and I told them what my father once told me. You take care of the land, and it'll take care of you. We weren't just saving soil anymore. We were saving what made people whole. The farmhouse became a living archive. People sent us letters, old deeds, maps, photos of family hands in dirt. We lined the walls with them. Museum of Resistance, a testament to everything the world tried to forget. One night, I opened the barn doors and stood in the center of the field. The wind carried no voices, no threats, just air. And for the first time, I spoke without fear. I kept my promise, Dad. I placed the original deed in a glass case beneath the old oak post. I planted one last seed, not for food, not for sale, just for memory. It grew wild and strange, something native, something old, something my father would have knelt beside and said, "That's the good kind." I never returned to Rhea's Innovations. They offered me the title, the board seat. Even the naming rights, I declined, because some names aren't meant to be tied to profits. They're meant to echo, not as headlines, but as roots. I knew my brother was going to betray me the moment he offered me coffee. Not because David never made coffee, we were both raised on caffeine and grit, but because he made it exactly how I liked it, down to the almond milk and cinnamon I always kept at the office. That was my first warning. The second was how he smiled, tight-lipped. Too polite, as if he were trying to keep from choking on whatever lie he was about to tell. "We need to talk, Elena," he said, setting the cup down between us. We sat in the glass-walled corner office we once dreamed of having. The one we earned. Together. 15 years ago, this company was a garage, 3 laptops, and my father's old irrigation blueprints. Now? It was a multi-million-dollar agri-tech empire, and the land we built it on, the land that still bore my father's initials carved into an old oak post, was now worth more than we ever imagined. "I already know what this is about," I said. "Apex called again, didn't they?" David didn't deny it. They increased their offer. "Elena, it's generational wealth. You and I would never have to work again. Not our kids, not their kids." "It's our father's land," I said. "It's not for sale." "Elena, he built everything with his bare hands. You want to bulldoze that for condos and spa? Retreats? It's not bulldozing. It's growing, evolving. It's selling out." His voice dropped. "You're being sentimental. And you're being bought." The silence that followed felt like a cliff between us. We'd argued before, over funding, partners, branding, but never like this. Never about the land. That was sacred. That was the one thing we promised never to touch. David leaned back in his chair, his tone suddenly corporate, clinical. "Then we'll need to reassess your position. The board can't move forward with deadlock." I narrowed my eyes. "You're threatening me." "I'm protecting our future." "No, you're protecting a deal that smells like blood money," he stood. "Take the weekend. Think about it." "I don't need the weekend." I stood too. "I'm not signing. Not ever." I left my coffee untouched. 3 days later, I showed up to work, and my keycard didn't work. Security wouldn't look me in the eye. My email was disabled. My name removed from the website. The receptionist, a girl I hired myself, stammered when I asked for access. "I'm sorry, Ms. Reyes. I was told, you no longer..." That's how I learned I'd been fired from the company I helped build. No phone call, no meeting, no dignity, just erased. Like I'd never been part of it. The walk back to my car felt like dragging a coffin behind me. I sat behind the wheel for 10 minutes without starting the engine. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, and for the first time since I'd buried my father, I felt truly orphaned. Not by death this time, but by betrayal. I tried David's number, straight to voicemail. I tried our COO. Disconnected. I tried Mia, my assistant for 6 years, who used to leave stress snacks on my desk. No answer. I called one more number. Mr. Halberd? I said when the line picked up. Elena? He said, warm but cautious, the way someone sounds when they know you're standing too close to a cliff's edge. I heard. I blinked. Already? Word travels fast when a Reyes leaves Reyes. Innovations. I didn't leave, I said. I was erased. A pause. Come see me. Mr. Halberd's law office still smelled like cigars and cedar. He didn't smoke, but his grandfather did. He kept the old humidor in the corner as a reminder of who built the firm, who fought to keep family businesses out of corporate graveyards. He handed me a glass of water. I think he knew I wouldn't touch it. What David did, I said. Can he get away with it? He sighed. You co-founded the company, but the founding contract, the one you both signed 11 years ago, had a provision, a discretionary removal clause for executive decision-making conflict, buried under Section 14. I never saw that. You didn't read that far. You were busy building. He was busy protecting control. I felt the heat rise in my face. I had trusted David. He'd handled the legal drafting while I handled the innovation. The farming systems, the tech, the branding. He said we were splitting the load. In reality, he was slipping the knife in early. And the shares? I asked. Frozen under majority vote. He has 60? He consolidated from silent partners 2 months ago. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't know. Until yesterday. I leaned forward. You're my father's lawyer. You saw his will. You knew how much that land meant to him. You knew he'd never want it sold. I did, he said. And I know something else, too. He slid a yellowed envelope across the desk. My name was written on the front in my father's handwriting. Only 2 words. For Elena, I didn't open. It in the office. I waited until I was home in the old farmhouse on the edge of town. The one I'd kept after my father died, even when David said it was dead weight. I sat on the porch with a mug of cold tea and opened the letter like I was unfolding the last piece of someone's life. Elena, if you're reading this, your brother has done what I feared he might. You always had my spine. You always said no when something felt wrong. That's why I'm trusting you now. The land is more than soil. It's memory. It's invention. And it's evidence. If Apex ever comes, knocking, don't just tell them no, show them why. Check under the oak post at the south edge. You'll find what they wanted buried, and maybe what David is afraid of too. Love. Dad, I folded the letter slowly. That oak post was the last thing my father touched before he collapsed in the field, heart giving out after decades of building dreams from dirt. I hadn't been able to go back there since the funeral. Now I had to. I went at sunrise. The fog still clung to the earth like it didn't want to let go. I wore gloves, brought a shovel, and kept one hand on my phone the entire time. It didn't take long. About 3 feet down, the shovel hit something hard. Metal. A rusted lockbox, sealed and wrapped in plastic. Inside, 3 items, a leather bound. Journal, a USB drive, a second deed to the land, signed only by my father, notarized, dated 6 months before his death. I pulled out the deed first. My hands shook. It clearly stated that the land, including all surrounding acres and any contents, above or below was transferred solely to me. Not the company, not to David. To Elena Reyes. That alone could stop the sale. But the journal? That's where the real story began. I spent hours flipping through it. It was a map of our father's final years, notes on failed patents, sketches of inventions, legal names of Apex board members, meetings he wasn't supposed to attend, phrases like stolen design, ghost company, and reputation laundering. One page had just a sentence. They offered me money to keep quiet. When I said no, the threats started. He wasn't just a farmer. He wasn't just a founder. He was a whistleblower. And Apex? They weren't after the land for condos. They were trying to wipe out the last piece of a story they'd tried to bury 30 years ago. And David, either he knew, or he was in so deep he didn't care anymore. That night, I stared at the USB in my hand. If the journal was the map, this was the match. I plugged it into my laptop. There were 3 folders: audio recordings, legal correspondence, Apex. Development. I clicked the audio files first. The first one made me stop breathing. This is Robert Reyes. Today is March 17th. I'm recording this in case I don't wake up tomorrow. If you're listening, it means they came after Elena, or David, gave in. I warned them. I told them. I built that irrigation software from nothing. Apex stole it. They said it was market adaptation. It wasn't. It was theft. And now they want the land to make sure I don't leave behind proof. But I did. I left it right where they won't look, next to the roots. I hit pause. My father's voice. Tired, rough, but steady. He'd known what was coming. He'd known exactly how far they'd go. I opened the next folder, emails from Apex attorneys to David, confidential terms, silence agreements, clauses that guaranteed massive payouts if the land was cleared before a certain date, and a clause about legacy suppression. That's what they called it. Legacy suppression. I stared at those words and felt the storm inside me finally rise. They wanted to erase my father. They wanted to replace our legacy with cement and steel, and my own brother handed them the keys. But I still had the lock. The next morning, I didn't go to the office. I went to a notary. Within the hour, the deed was authenticated. Legally, publicly, and irreversibly, I owned the land. Not the company, not David. Me. I took it straight to Halberd's office. He ran a few verification checks, then looked up at me with something between pride and concern. "This will freeze any pending real estate transfer," he said. "If David signed anything with Apex, it'll be void once they see this." I nodded. "I'm not just stopping a sale. I'm starting a fire." "Just be careful," he warned. "David isn't just a sibling anymore. He's a man who knows he's losing everything." That night, I sent David a text. "I have the deed. I have the journal. Walk away before I take this public." He didn't reply, at least not with words. Instead, a black SUV showed up at the farmhouse around midnight. It idled for a full minute at the edge of the property before slowly backing out and disappearing down the road. I didn't sleep, not because I was scared, because I was furious. By morning, I had a plan. I forwarded the Apex emails, the deed, and my father's recording to 3 people. A journalist at an independent business watchdog site, a retired tech blogger who once investigated patent fraud in Silicon Valley, and Maya Tran, a former federal investigator turned whistleblower advocate. Then, I got in my truck and drove back to the company I co-founded. I didn't use the front door. I walked straight into the construction site next to the building, land they were already prepping for Apex's luxury project. And I started digging. Literally. Just like my father had, with gloves, a crowbar, and a copy of the deed tucked into a waterproof sleeve in my jacket. Security tried to stop me. I showed them the deed. I showed them the notarization. And then I dropped the bomb. "You're trespassing on private property," I said. "Mine." By the time David arrived, Red-faced and raging, local police were already pulling up. He stepped out of his car and stormed across the site. "Elena, what the hell are you doing?" "Protecting what's mine. What's Dad's?" "You're going to kill the deal." "Good. This isn't just about you anymore." "Exactly," I said, louder now. "It's about the kind of men who lie, steal, and sign deals behind their own sister's back. It's about a man who fired his co-founder so he could sell out his father's name for beachfront cocktail parties." I saw it then. Real panic in his eyes. Not because of what I said, because of who heard it. Reporters were arriving. Someone had tipped them off. Good. I gave them everything. The emails, the voice recordings, even the scanned copy of the page from my father's journal that read, "If they offer to buy the land, it's because they're trying to bury me." David's world unraveled in real time, and I walked away from the construction site with cameras flashing, heart pounding, and the entire company watching from their office windows. But it wasn't over, because Apex still hadn't shown their hand. Not fully, and I knew they wouldn't go quietly. That night, I found my laptop hacked, files gone, drive corrupted. My cloud backup account? Locked out, my phone pinged with a blocked number. "You should have taken the money." Then another. Next. "Time, we don't just erase your files." I didn't sleep again, but not because of fear, because I was one step ahead. I still had a physical backup drive, one I'd given to Maya in person before I ever touched the USB. It wasn't just about evidence anymore. It was about exposing the machine. The next day, Maya called. "We verified the metadata," she said. "Your father's recordings are authentic. So are the emails, and the deed is unchallengeable. I've already sent preliminary files to the Department of Justice and a journalist at The Guardian. What now?" "Now you wait, and you protect yourself." That evening, I sat in the field where my father used to plant tomatoes every spring. The Kye. Air smelled like earth, cold and clean. I closed my eyes and thought about the last thing he ever said to me. It wasn't profound. It was small. "You take care of the land, baby girl," he'd said. "Because the land takes care of us." He didn't mean the dirt. He meant the truth. That's what they were trying to pave over. Not just a patch of soil, but the evidence of what really happened. And I wasn't going to let them. Not now. Not ever. The next time David called me, it wasn't to apologize, it was to beg. "Elena, listen to me," he said, voice hollow. "You don't know who you're dealing with." "Oh, now I don't know things," I snapped. That's rich coming from the man who deleted my access and tried to sell the truth. "I didn't have a choice," he said. "They had me. Cornered." Apex wasn't just after the land. They knew about Dad's software. They threatened to expose me. Said I helped falsify documents years ago. I thought if I cooperated, they'd let me go. "You thought you could feed them our legacy and just walk away clean?" I was scared. You should be scared now. I hung up. Then I locked the doors, pulled the blinds, and waited. Because I knew what was coming next. Not from David. From them. They came the next night. Not in suits. In silence. 2 men in tactical gear tripped the motion sensor at 2:43 a.m. Watched them on the security feed Gabriel had helped me install. Black hoodies, gloves, a crowbar, and a USB disruptor. They weren't here to rob me. They were here to erase me. I called Gabriel from the bathroom, whispering, "They're here. Don't engage. I'll reroute a local deputy. Just stall." I hit the floodlights. They froze. I stepped out onto the porch holding my father's shotgun. Loaded. Safety off. They didn't move. "Take one more step, and the only thing you'll be erasing is your own kneecaps," I said. One bolted. The other stood there just long enough to pull back his hood. It wasn't a stranger. It was someone I used to see in Apex boardrooms. That was the message. They wanted me to know it was personal. The next morning, the story broke nationwide. Maya had pushed it to every major outlet. Headlines read, "Ex-tech giant's land deal tied to decades-old corporate cover-up family legacy, hijacked by greed and corporate collusion. Whistleblower's daughter exposes threats, bribery, and a billion-dollar lie." The footage of me confronting David at the site went viral. So did a soundbite of my father's voice. They said I could walk away if I signed. I told them I don't walk away from the truth. It wasn't just business anymore. It was personal for thousands of viewers. It became a symbol, land, legacy, and power being reclaimed. And then the bombshell dropped. The Department of Justice opened a probe into Apex's founder. David was subpoenaed. The land deal was officially suspended under federal investigation, and for the first time in months, I had leverage. David showed up at the farmhouse in a rental sedan, unshaven and visibly unraveling. I didn't. Invite him in. He stood in the field where we used to build water models as kids. "You destroyed me?" he said. "No. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone else saw it." He looked around, like trying to take one last breath of something he knew he'd never own again. "I loved Dad, too," he said. "Then you should have remembered what he stood for." "I didn't think you'd fight back this hard." "That's your problem, David. You've always underestimated what I'd do to protect what matters." His shoulders slumped. "They'll come for you again. Apex won't stop." "I'm counting on it," I said. "Because this time, I'm not the only one watching." The farmhouse became more than a home. It became a headquarters. Maya and I formed a coalition: landowners, women-led businesses, legacy farmers. We started sharing stories, legal help, security support. We called it Rooted Truth. The mission was simple: protect land, protect legacy, and stop billion-dollar lies from rewriting family names. But we knew we weren't done. One more card had to be played. Apex's founder, Carter Vance, was still protected by layers of legal insulation, until we uncovered the recording my father had saved on a separate tape, buried in the box under the oak post. I hadn't listened to it until now. His voice crackled. "This is for Elena. If you hear this, it means the land is in danger." Carter Vance stole my early designs. He used them to seed what became Apex's entire smart irrigation model. The proof is in the ledger I kept in the shed. And if something happens to me, it wasn't my heart. It was them. I found the ledger in a waterproof case under the floorboards of the old tool shed. Inside, handwritten notes, timestamps, schematics, identical to Apex's earliest patents, only dated years earlier in my father's ink. We delivered it to the J, and finally, they had enough. Carter Vance was indicted on multiple counts: corporate fraud, IP theft, and obstruction. His mugshot was on every business channel by morning. Apex, their stock collapsed. The land? Saved. A federal injunction declared it a protected site, per my father's original zoning petition filed years ago but never processed, until now. And David? He disappeared from headlines, stripped of his title, divested from the company. Some say he left the country. I don't follow his story anymore, because I'm too busy writing mine. The press conference was held in the only place that made sense. The land, not inside a marble lobby or behind a desk, but right where our fathers. Hands had once turned soil, and dreams into something tangible. Maya stood at my side, her legal team close by. Reporters filled the makeshift chairs, notebooks ready, cameras rolling. I wore jeans, boots caked with dirt, and my father's old denim jacket. No armor, but truth. When I stepped to the mic, the wind caught the edges of my speech. I didn't look down. I didn't need to. I co-founded Reyes Innovations with my brother, I began, voice steady. We built something from nothing. But what we built wasn't just business. It was rooted in the legacy of a man who taught us that integrity, matters more than profit. That land means more than square footage. That some things aren't for sale. Cameras flashed. The crowd quieted. When Apex tried to buy what wasn't theirs, they didn't just come for our fields. They came for our family name. Our fathers. Work? Our truth. I paused, then looked directly at the lenses. They tried to erase me, fire me, silence me. But here I am, standing on the same land they tried to pave, holding the same legacy they tried to bury. And now, that legacy is speaking for itself. Behind me, the legal declaration of preservation, signed and sealed, was mounted on a board. The crowd applauded. A standing ovation from strangers who had seen a woman lose everything and claw her way back with nothing but grit and proof. But one face in the crowd didn't clap. He watched. Sunglasses. Suit too clean. Hand still. I recognized him. He was at Apex's private security event 2 years ago.